Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing books I thought I would hate, but ended up loving. Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about books that I was very hesitant to pick up for whatever reason, whether they were sports romances or monster romances, but I was just positive I wasn't going to enjoy these books, and then I ended up rating them 4.5 or 5 stars. So I am so excited to talk about these books with you guys, and if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these books. And first up is actually the inspiration for this video. So we have Ensnared by Tiffany Roberts. So I had absolutely no interest in reading an alien spider romance. I hate spiders, like with a burning passion. I don't like spiders, so a spider romance just did not sound good to me. However, I ended up collabing with Jen from the Book Refuge, and this is one of the books she picked for me to read, and I absolutely adored it. The romance between the human and spider is just absolutely adorable. So if you're unfamiliar with the plot of Ensnared, we are following Catan, and he is this giant alien spider living on this alien planet, and he is like a hunter, and he is being ruled by like the queen of the spiders. Now the queen of the spiders is absolutely evil, and she wants Catan to be her mate, and now Catan keeps like denying her advances and really does not want anything to do with this queen. So one day while Catan is out just exploring, he ends up finding this spaceship, and inside the spaceship is Ivy. So he wakes up Ivy, and Ivy kind of pantomimes and explains that she was on her way to start a new human colony, and the spaceship like crash landed. So the first half of this book is really just Ivy and Catan trying to communicate with each other because obviously they don't speak the same language. Also, Ivy's very worried about Catan trying to eat her, as she like should be. He's a giant spider. And Catan is kind of treating Ivy as like a pet, and it's so it's adorable, their romance. And slowly as they start to get to know each other, a romance blossoms. And I loved this book. I will say the second book in the series is a lot darker. There are some scenes between the Queen of the Spiders and Catan that were kind of hard to read, but I am so excited to finish off the series. The third book just came out via audio at the time I'm filming this, so I will definitely be reading that in December. But if you are interested in spider romances or alien romances, definitely check out Ensnared. And next up, we have Heartless by Elise Silver. So for some background, I read Flawless when all of the hype was coming out over the Chestnut Springs series, and I hated it. I ended up rating it 2.5 stars. I just didn't feel connected to the characters, and the chemistry just didn't work for me, so I had no interest in picking up Heartless, which is the second book in this series. That is until I found out it was age gap, single dad, nanny romance, and that checks all of my boxes of things I like in a romance book. So I read this while I was on vacation and then proceeded to ignore my family and just couldn't stop reading this book until I finished. The humor in this is so good. Also, Kate Eaton is like top book boyfriend, and I loved Willa just overall. She's one of my favorite characters. So this is going to be one of my top reads of the year. It was just so much fun. If you are unfamiliar with the plot of Heartless, we are following Kate Eaton, and he is this grumpy single dad, and he is working on a farm, and he's trying to find someone to help look after his kid. So he ends up hiring Willa, not realizing that she's actually an ex-bartender and has no history working with children. But despite this, she's absolutely amazing with his son, and soon a relationship starts to bloom between the two, and it is super spicy and so good and forbidden, and I loved it so much. So please, if you read any books I'm about to talk about, you need to read this book. Like I said, one of my top reads of the year, and just absolutely amazing. And this next book, I didn't necessarily think I would hate, but I was pretty sure I wasn't going to really enjoy as much as everybody else. It is a high school romance, and I tend not to love high school romances, mostly because I feel like you can age up the characters and make it college, and you don't lose any of the plot. But for this book series, I understand why it's set in high school. It is so unbelievably emotional, and another top read of the year, and it is the Binding 13 Boys of Tommen series. So the first book is Binding 13. I think I'm actually holding Keeping 13, which is my favorite out of the two. But the first two books in this series are just phenomenal. They are so emotional and just absolutely amazing. We are following Shannon Lynch and Johnny Kavanagh. So Shannon is this girl, I think she's 15 at the start of this, and she is growing up in just this terrible home environment. Her father is an alcoholic. Her mother is just doing whatever she can to survive. and she is being bullied relentlessly in school. So eventually her mother decides that she's going to try to send Shannon to Tommen University, and that is what ends up happening. So on Shannon's first day, she is walking across the rugby court, and she ends up getting hit with a rugby ball, and she goes unconscious, and when she wakes up, she is looking at Johnny Kavanagh, and it is their romance, and check all of the trigger warnings. This series is unbelievably emotional. I haven't read the 2 books that come after the first 2, but I've heard they're even more emotional than these, and I can't even imagine that. But yeah, definitely check trigger warnings, but highly, highly recommend. I think this series is worth all of the hype. And next up is another book I read because of a collab. So we have Home Game by Odette Stone. Now, I was not a fan of hockey romances, and earlier this year, hockey romances were everywhere in the bookish community. You could not go anywhere without seeing some sort of hockey romance reference. So I just wanted to avoid them. However, I ended up doing a collab video, and that person recommended I pick up Home Game by Odette Stone, and I loved it. So this story is following a girl, her name is Zoe, and she's homeless, and one day she's like at a coffee shop, and she ends up helping out this guy who turns out to be a famous hockey player. Now, she keeps telling this guy that she needs to be home by a certain time, and they end up passing that time. He drives her home, finds out that she's actually going to a homeless shelter, but she can't get in because they are past the time of the closing. So he offers to let her stay at his house, and the story kind of goes from there. And it is so emotional. I feel like I'm saying that about a lot of these books, but I was expecting this to be very much about hockey, and although a lot of scenes are set like at the hockey rink, this was a very beautiful story between Zoe and Ryan, and I just loved it. So if you are looking for a hockey romance that will really pull at your heartstrings, highly recommend Home Game. And next up, we have The Summer We Fell by Elizabeth O'Rourke. Now, I was worried about picking up this book only because I've read other books by this author and they haven't really worked out for me. So Waking Olivia is a book that a lot of my friends really, really enjoyed, but personally, I just didn't love it. So I was very hesitant to pick up this book. However, I think it was Jess from Peace Love Books was talking about this synopsis, and I was like, you know what? That sounds like a book I'll really enjoy, and I am so happy I picked it up because I loved it. So this story is following Juliet, and she has a terrible home life, so she ends up moving in with her boyfriend's parents. Now, her boyfriend's parents are very conservative, and they essentially treat Juliet almost like an indentured servant. She has to work to pretty much earn her stay, and she tries not to be a burden. So she is working, I think, 2 jobs, also doing all the chores in this house, and is just trying to kind of fly under the radar. So one day, her boyfriend ends up coming home from college, and he brings with him his best friend. And right away, Juliet and his best friend hate each other, but slowly that hate turns into fiery passion, and it is just so good. So this has a little bit of a love triangle. I also suggest checking trigger warnings, but I read this book in one sitting, and it was probably one of my favorite reads of the summer. And this next book is actually a recent read, so it is Butcher and Blackbird. And this is a dark rom-com romance. Now, I don't like rom-coms. It's very, very rare that I rate a rom-com romance high. Typically, they normally sit at like a 2.53 star just because they're fun while I'm reading them, but they're never very memorable. This book was so good, but it was so dark. Like, check all of the trigger warnings. Accidental cannibalism being one of the funniest ones I've ever heard of. There's an entire list. I also highly, highly recommend the audiobook for this. Joe Arden is my favorite audiobook narrator of all time. This book sealed it. I just love his voice and the way he acted out this character. So, so good. But if you're unfamiliar with the plot of this book, we are following these 2 vigilante serial killers that after a chance meeting, they end up deciding that they are going to have a serial killer competition where they both compete to kill a serial killer before the other one does once a year in a given location. And they do that. And as they're doing this every year, they are slowly kind of falling more and more in love with each other. But the serial killers they're killing, because I don't know if I mentioned they're vigilante serial killers, are like classic serial killer tropes. So you have a Hannibal Lecter type serial killer that they actually go to a dinner party and then they kill him. One of them ends up ingesting the food that he cooked. So that's where that one trigger comes in. Then there's like a Texas Chainsaw type serial killer that while they're kissing, there's a Texas Chainsaw guy just like running around and you hear people screaming. So like it's so, so dark, but also so, so cute because these 2 killers don't know how to act around each other because they don't really know how to let anyone in because they've really guarded their real selves for so long. And it was such a good story and so, so cute, but also so disturbing. but so cute and also really funny. So highly recommend. I loved this book and it was just so unique. And next up we have Order of the Scorpions by Ivy Asher. Now I didn't think I would hate this book, but I was very nervous to pick it up only because I hadn't heard a lot of people talking about it. And there weren't a lot of reviews at the time that I read this. It is also super chunky. However, I am so happy I read this dark fantasy Why Choose Romance because I ended up reading it in 2 days. It was unlike any other book I'd read. It was so good. So this story is following Offset. In the beginning of our story, we see Offset and she's completely nude in this jail cell and she is taken by these 2 orc-like creatures to this interrogator. Now, she has no memory of who she is, how she ended up where she is, and is just terrified for her life. And this interrogator essentially starts torturing her. And then a group of masked assassins show up, kill the interrogator, but just leave Offset chained to the floor. So right away, Offset's like, I hate these guys. I'm gonna kill them eventually. So eventually, Offset ends up being taken to this assassin training camp where she has to learn to become a killer. And hopefully, if she is taken by or bought by an assassin group and kills enough people, she will earn her freedom. So when the day comes where she is to be purchased by an assassin group, those masked people from the beginning of the book show back up and they're like, we want her. And it's that story. So it is a Why Choose Romance. It's mostly just Offset trying to figure out who she is, what her history is, and surviving with this group of killer assassin individuals. And it is glorious and also very dark, but so glorious. So highly recommend. Very spicy. In the second half, the first half of this book, I will say is very much world building and just like a lot of training montages, but keep with it. The second half is amazing. So highly recommend. And last up is the Perfectly Imperfect Mafia romance series. Now this is another one I didn't think I would hate, but I also didn't think I would adore nearly as much as I do. This is my favorite Mafia romance series of all time. Nothing else even compares. So I believe I've read the first 6 books, but I think there are 9 that have released. I am just waiting for the audio to come out for the rest of the series, but all of the books are following different people that are in the Mafia and the women that end up marrying them or being stuck with them. And it does have a lot of disability rep, chronic illness rep, and it's just all of the stories have been fantastic. I don't think I've rated a single book under 4 stars, and they're very short reads, but in those short reads, you become so attached to these characters. This author just does such an amazing job of making you instantly connect. Like, I love these characters with all of my heart. So if you have not picked up the Perfectly Imperfect Mafia romance series yet, you need to. All right, guys, those are all the books I thought I would hate but ended up loving. Please let me know down in the comments below if this has ever happened to you, if you've ever been really hesitant to pick up a book but then ended up loving it. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!